Hello everyone, it's Pastor Michael Lawson coming to you from Portage First United Methodist Church. Today I'm in our sanctuary sitting next to the hope window, which seems appropriate, for Christ is indeed our hope, even in these uncertain times. I hope all of you have received the news that our Council of Bishops has consecrated today to pray for an end to the pandemic. And they're also asking all Christians everywhere to pause today at noon and recite the Lord's Prayer wherever you are, in whatever time zone you're in, today at noon, to pause and to pray the Lord's Prayer. In moments like this, we need to turn to God and return to Him and ask for His help and His assistance. In fact, that's our text for today. That's what we're going to be talking about today. You know, in monastic houses and pastors and people all over the world pray what is called the daily office. And the daily office is a series of prayers. There's one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening, and one just before bed. The morning prayer is called lauds, and lauds means to glorify. And so you begin your day by asking God to be glorified in the day ahead. Then at the known prayer, which is the afternoon prayer, that's the time when you spend time repenting and asking God to forgive you. I think they put it there because probably by noon every day we've probably already sinned by that point. It's probably a good time to reassess and get back on the right road for the rest of your day. In the evening, the prayers are called Vespers, and then just before bed, you have what's called Compline, which means to complete. And that's one of my favorites because one of the prayers they pray is Zechariah's prayer from the Gospel of St. Luke. Lord, you now dismiss your servant to go in peace. These eyes of mine have seen the Savior. And you're supposed to look back over your day and think about the moment in your day when you saw Jesus. What's interesting about these prayers in these times is that they pray the Psalms primarily, but there's also sort of a versicle, a little thing to begin the prayers every time. And that little thing is, the person says, "O Lord, come to my assistance." And then there's a response, "O Lord, make haste to help me." And when I hear those words, it always reminds me just how much of life we just can't get through without God's presence. It's utterly impossible to make it through a day without calling upon God. When some tragedies happened in my home church years ago, my good friend Jeannie Mills said, "I just don't understand how people can get through life without a church family and without people like this." And the reality is these people are representations of Jesus. And the reality is that we cannot seem to make it through a day without truly calling upon Jesus. We're living in a very uncertain time, a very scary time for a lot of different reasons. I find myself thinking a lot more about the church's finances than usual and thinking more about my own financial stability in ways that I haven't before. I've been thinking about the people in my life who are vulnerable. Every time my sister tells me she has to go into work in Indianapolis, I'm like, well, make sure you wash your hands a lot. The good news is that most of us are able to work from home or work remotely, but that's not true of everyone. Chris Bailey this week read us a note from her nephew. He's a nurse, and he's talking about how they don't have enough masks, enough ventilators. They don't have all the resources that they need, and that he and his colleagues are putting their lives in danger every day because they don't have the protection that they need from this disease. We live in a very scary and uncertain time. This makes me think about a prophet in the Bible, one of my absolute favorites, one of the first books that I remember really, really enjoying when I first became a Christian. He's one of the minor prophets, which doesn't mean that he's minor in importance. It just means that his book is relatively short. And his name is Habakkuk. Now, Habakkuk is sassy. It's part of what I love about him. And he starts off his book by complaining to God. And he's literally asking God, where are you exactly? What are you up to? Are you doing anything down here? I'm looking around and I'm seeing people being violent and hateful and cruel and mean, and you aren't doing anything. And God responds. And but he does say this great thing. I'm going to sit on the city wall and wait for God to answer to me. Wait for God to answer to me. He is really, really fiery. And so God answers, I've seen. I've been paying attention. I've seen what your countrymen are doing. I've seen the sin and the meanness and the cruelty, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to send the Babylonians, and they're going to destroy your whole country. So I'm on it. And then Habakkuk comes back, and he's like, excuse me? You're going to destroy our entire nation? This is good for you? You're going to destroy our nation. That's what you're going to do. This is the plan. Because that's not a good plan. And God responds, this is what has to happen. But I'll give you this message of hope. The righteous will live by faith. And so Habakkuk comes around and he comes to this conclusion. He ends his prayer. He ends his book with a prayer. And he says, I heard God's words and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound, and decay crept into my bones. My legs trembled. He's describing how painful it was to get this message from God. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come upon the nation invading us. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, and the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, when there are no sheep in the pen, and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of the deer. He enables me to go on to the heights. Habakkuk, at the end of his book, recognizes the fact that calamity stands at his very door. And yet he decides, I will rejoice in God. I will put my faith in God, and God will be my Savior. There will come a day when the Babylonians will be put aside. And I'm going to wait for that day. It seems this week, as I watched our national leaders talk about this, there's just this sense of, we just need to get this over with so that we can get our economy back. We just need to get this over with. But the message of the gospel, the message of the Christian story is often that we have to wait. We have to wait for our salvation to come. We have to trust, and we have to have hope in God. And, well, many of our national leaders just aren't able to do that. I have to talk today a little bit about what has been said by first a senator in Texas, Glenn Beck, Britt Hume. They all recommended that our elders return to work to get the economy back on track and sacrifice themselves and be subjected to the disease. And if they die, well, then that's just what they have to do for our economy. And they would want to do that for their grandchildren. And it seemed to me like it was putting something very powerful on its head. In many cultures, they revere their elders. They protect their elders. And yet, what I'm seeing among some of our leadership, though not all, thankfully, what I'm seeing among our leadership is a temptation to sacrifice our elders to wealth, to mammon, to the god of money. And doesn't Jesus tell us you cannot serve both God and money? You cannot serve both God and mammon, for you will love one and you will hate the other. And the reality is that mammon is a very, very hungry God. He will devour your children. He will devour anything that you give him. And he demands more and more in his service. And when I heard these leaders say this week, I just thought, they are not worshiping our God. They are worshiping money. They're not putting their trust that God has a brighter day for us. Doesn't Jeremiah, in the very midst of the Babylonian exile, doesn't he say, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. The time is now to turn towards God. The time has come now to respond to God by saying, okay, it's scary, I'm terrified, decay creeps into my bones like Habakkuk. I heard and my bones wasted away. My tongue rots in my mouth. These sorts of images that he uses, these poetic images. We can say these things to God and say, but I know you've got this. I know you're taking care of us. It's just going to take time. I'm going to close today with yet another poem. I did a poem last week. I'm going to do another one this week. This one is by Brother Chuck Killian. He's a monk at St. John's Abbey in Minnesota. And the poem is called, and I love this, he's a very funny guy, Swift, Lord, You Are Not. And he uses as his inspiration a quote from the book of Sirach, which is in the Apocrypha, and it says, "Quickly God causes his blessings to flourish." And so he's responding. This poem is in response to this verse. Quickly God causes his blessings to flourish. This is not my experience. You are not God at the ready. After you set off the Big Bang, you invented light years, dawdling. Dispatch, you dropped down the nearest black hole. After the pyrotechnics of the start, you looked away, Sabbathed. When I think you're stretching out your arm, to stretch it out like Moses, so I can prevail over the Amalekites, it is biblical sleight of hand. Actually, you're raising your arm to fix an arrow in your bow, aimed at some stellar gases or storms on the sun. Think less of galaxies. Think small. Then, without the heavy equipment, stoop and hasten to help me. We're back to the beginning, aren't we? How do we begin our prayers? O Lord, come to my assistance. O Lord, make haste to help me.